Nobody saw this coming. Not like this, not this fast. After over 2 decades at the helm, Christian Horner's Red Bull legacy came crashing down in a way that stunned every F1 fan, driver, and executive watching. One minute he's on the pit wall in his signature team jacket, and the next, boom, gone. No farewell, no final race, no gradual exit. Just a cold, immediate firing that shook the paddock to its core. To understand how we got here, you've got to zoom out and look at the shifting power dynamics inside Red Bull. Because this isn't just a story of one guy losing his job. It's a story of control, backroom politics, and years of brewing tension finally reaching a boiling point. For the longest time, Horner was bulletproof. His alliance with the tie-back faction of Red Bull, especially shareholder Laurel Makai, kept him untouchable. Laurel only had 2% of shares personally, but he represented the family's 51% majority. That meant nothing happened without tie approval. And Horner? He had their blessing. But then May 20th happened. That's the day Laurel quietly transferred his shares to a Geneva-based trust, effectively stepping away. It didn't make headlines at the time, but in hindsight, that's when Horner's fate was sealed. Without the tie backing, the Austrian faction, led by Red Bull's European shareholders, were finally free to act. And act they did. The Austrians had been waiting in the wings, frustrated by Horner's growing influence and the controversy stacking up around him. As soon as the power balance shifted, they pounced. No discussion, no slow transition, just a blunt, "You're out." And they didn't even wait for the season to end, which tells you just how deep the cracks had grown. When a team doesn't even want your face in the garage anymore, something serious went down. But here's where it gets even messier. Enter the Verstappens. Jos Verstappen, in particular, has reportedly had it out for Horner for a while. The whispers go back at least to early 2024, when Jos openly criticized Horner during a bitter internal spat. Max, publicly, stayed diplomatic. But behind closed doors, the Verstappen camp was gaining power. And with Max being the crown jewel of Red Bull, let's be real, the guy is their entire brand right now, his influence carries weight. Rumors started flying that Josh and Mac's manager were in talks with other teams, including Mercedes. Suddenly, there's leverage on the table. One theory floating around is that Mac's camp made a subtle ultimatum: clean house at the top, or don't be surprised if he jumps ship. Even though his contract runs until 2028, it reportedly has release clauses. And with Red Bull's performance dipping and Mercedes sniffing around, that leverage became deadly. But let's not pretend this was all politics and power plays. Horner didn't help himself either. 18 months ago, he was hit with serious allegations of inappropriate behavior from a female colleague. He was cleared twice, but the damage was done. Leaked messages hit the press, headlines exploded, and suddenly Horner wasn't just the guy who brought Red Bull to glory, he was the guy embarrassing the brand. It didn't matter if the claims didn't stick, the perception stuck. And in the corporate world, perception is everything. Even Bernie Ecclestone, one of Horner's closest allies, said it felt like Red Bull treated him like he murdered someone. Harsh words from a man who rarely criticizes. But the point was clear: this wasn't your typical firing. This was a takedown. And the question everyone's asking now is, was it justified, or was Horner thrown under the bus by the very machine he helped build? Behind the drama of Horner's exit was a much deeper unraveling of Red Bull's internal structure. Once a tightly run ship under the late Dietrich Mateschitz, the company now felt more like a tug-of-war arena. With Dietrich's death in 2022, the balance he carefully maintained collapsed. His son, Mark Mateschitz, inherited the responsibility, but lacked the same grip or desire to micromanage team politics. Into that vacuum stepped figures like Oliver Mintzlaff, Red Bull's new head of global sports, who brought a colder, more corporate approach. Mintzlaff, along with other Austrian stakeholders, reportedly viewed Horner as a relic of the old regime, too powerful, too autonomous, and too entangled in controversies. They were less interested in loyalty and legacy and more focused on cleaning up the image, asserting control, and steering the ship their way. And with Laurel's tie voting shield out of the picture, they didn't have to wait anymore. The timing couldn't have been worse for Horner. Red Bull was already under pressure from dropping results. While still competitive, the gap between them and McLaren had widened. At Silverstone, Max's fifth-place finish and Yuki Tsunoda's disastrous last place only reinforced what insiders had been whispering. Red Bull had lost its edge. They were no longer the unstoppable force they used to be. And when performance dips, patience thins, especially with a leadership figure already under scrutiny. But what truly shattered Horner's standing within the team was the loss of his key lieutenants. Rob Marshall, a longtime chief designer, left for McLaren. Sporting director Jonathan Wheatley jumped ship to lead Sauber, soon to become Audi. And most crucially, Adrian Newey, the mastermind behind Red Bull's championship-winning cars, walked out in May 2024. His relationship with Horner had reportedly become strained, in part due to the fallout from the harassment scandal. Losing Newey was like a gut punch. This was the man behind the magic, the engineer who gave Red Bull their edge for years, and he left. It didn't just hurt Red Bull's technical capabilities, it shattered the illusion that Horner still had the locker room. If Newey no longer believed in the project, who else might be quietly reconsidering? The Verstappen camp certainly wasn't sitting still. With Joss's influence growing and Max's future a constant subject of speculation, Red Bull had every reason to worry. The team's entire brand rested on Max. Keeping him happy, secure, and in the driver's seat was priority number one. If that meant removing Horner to guarantee Max's loyalty, then so be it. And this wasn't just paranoia. Mercedes boss Toto Wolff confirmed that conversations had taken place with Max's camp. Nothing official, of course, but enough to stir fear in Red Bull's leadership. If Max had an exit clause and the engine regulation changes in 2026 were looming, the team had no margin for error. They needed to show they were stable, forward-thinking, and ready for the next chapter. A fresh face at the top without baggage was part of that equation. That face turned out to be Laurel Makai, promoted internally after years of leading Red Bull's junior driver program. While he wasn't the most obvious replacement, his appointment sent a clear signal. The Austrians were moving forward on their terms. Clean slate, new blood. And with Makai seen as someone less divisive and more aligned with corporate values, the message was unmistakable. This is Red Bull too, and there's no room for ghosts of the past. The real wild card in this saga is what happens next, for Horner, for Red Bull, and for Formula One as a whole. Because this isn't just a team principal losing his job. This is a tectonic shift in one of the most dominant dynasties in motorsport history, and the aftershocks are already being felt. For starters, Horner isn't finished. Not even close. Sources say both Alpine and Ferrari are sniffing around, curious to see if the man who helped build Red Bull into a global powerhouse is ready for a new challenge. Alpine in particular could be an interesting fit. They're switching to Mercedes engines in 2026 and desperately need someone to unify the operation. Horner, with his deep understanding of team dynamics and political maneuvering, could be exactly what they need. If he lands there, it wouldn't just be a comeback, it'd be a full-on redemption arc. Ferrari, meanwhile, is in a constant state of reinvention. If things unravel there, again, Horner could be their emergency call. His reputation, while dented, still carries weight. And in F1, experience counts for a lot more than a clean track record, especially when titles are on the line. Red Bull, on the other hand, faces a far more uncertain road. While Laurel Makai brings fresh energy, he steps into a minefield. The team's technical foundation is still solid, but the aura of invincibility has cracked. With Newey gone and several other key figures walking out the door, there's a real question about whether the machine can still run at championship pace. And looming over all of it are the 2026 engine regulations. These aren't just tweaks, they're a complete overhaul, and for the first time, Red Bull is building their own engine from scratch under the Red Bull Powertrains division. It's a massive undertaking, and rumors suggest they might already be falling behind Mercedes in development. If that's true, and if 2026 rolls around with Red Bull still ironing out kinks while others are ready to launch, they could go from kings of the grids to midfield hopefuls in a matter of months. That's where the Verstappen question gets even bigger. Max might say all the right things in interviews, but the paddock knows he's watching everything. If Red Bull starts sliding, if the new engine doesn't deliver, or if team leadership fumbles the transition, don't be surprised if Max starts shopping around seriously. Mercedes would welcome him with open arms. McLaren might even throw a Hail Mary, and suddenly Red Bull could find themselves rebuilding not just leadership, but identity. Fans too are split. Some believe Horner had it coming, that he got too comfortable, too powerful, and too messy. Others think he was sacrificed to cover up deeper flaws, made the fall guy for a team trying to dodge accountability. But either way, everyone agrees on one thing: it's the end of an era. What Horner built at Red Bull was more than just a winning team. It was a culture, a philosophy, a brand that turned a rebellious energy drink into a motorsport empire. And while his time there might have ended in chaos, his impact won't be forgotten anytime soon. As F1 barrels toward its next chapter, with new engines, new players, and new leaders, the legacy of Christian Horner remains one of dominance, controversy, and ambition. Whether he returns to the grid or not, his name will echo through every paddock, every press room, and every conversation about what it takes to rule the racing world and how quickly it can all fall apart.